There lived a man whose name was Aesop. Each day he would come to the marketplace to sit, and soon people would gather at his feet. All kinds of people, young and old, short and tall, rich and poor, because Aesop was a very wise man. And they would say,
"Tell us a story, weave us a tale, and take us to Never Never Land, a kingdom of strange and wonderful things that appear with a wave of your hand, that appear with a wave of your hand."
This is the story of the most famous race in history, the race between the tortoise and the hare, or, as they're more usually called, the turtle and the rabbit. Now, Mr. Rabbit, as everyone knows, is one of the fastest runners in the forest. He goes like the wind, hopping in great leaps, so fast that it's hard for the eye to keep up with him. One moment he's here, the next, he's there. Well, sir, because he could run so fast, he'd go through the forest bragging about how wonderful he was.
I'm the fastest fella in the forest, Rapid Rabbit, that's me. And I'll gladly challenge anyone at all who dares to disagree. In a 100-yard dash, I'll let anyone have a lead of 99. And I'll be there with time to spare to greet him at the finish line. I'm the fastest fella in the forest, Rapid Rabbit, that's me. You can have your streak of lightning and your high-powered jet, 'cause let me tell you, brother, I'm the fastest thing yet. I'll gladly challenge anyone who dares to disagree. Rapid Rabbit, that's me.
Well, you can see for yourselves how conceited he was. And he'd make fun of all the other animals because they couldn't run as fast as he. But of all the animals he made fun of, the one he made the most fun of was Mr. Turtle. Because, as everyone also knows, Mr. Turtle is probably the slowest runner in the forest. Every time he'd meet Mr. Turtle, he'd say,
Hi, Speedy. You coming or going?
And he'd laugh. And Mr. Turtle would say,
"Oh, gosh."
Or sometimes Mr. Rabbit would make a different joke.
You're so slow, I don't know whether you're coming or going.
And Mr. Turtle would say,
"Oh, golly."
And that's the way it went, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. Each time he'd meet Mr. Turtle, he'd make fun of him. Until one day...
Hi, Speedy. You coming or going?
"Oh, go jump in the lake."
Huh?
"I've had about as much as I can take. I've stood about as much as I can stand. I've been a perfect gentleman, but things have gotten slightly out of hand. I can see now that the time comes when the self-respect of turtledom's at stake. So I've stood about as much as I can stand. And I've had about as much as I can take.
As you can see, Mr. Turtle was pretty angry. But that didn't seem to worry Mr. Rabbit.
Well, what are you going to do about it, Speedy?
This is what I'm going to do about it, Mr. Rabbit. I hereby challenge you to a race.
Mr. Rabbit could not believe his ears.
You? Against me? A race? You? I can't believe my ears.
I can't either. Do you accept the challenge?
Do I accept? I'll leave you so far behind you won't know what month you're in. I'll get there so far ahead of you, you'll think you were in a different race. I'll beat you so badly, you'll be too ashamed to show your face in the forest again.
To which Mr. Turtle replied with great dignity,
Oh, fiddle faddle.
Well, word of the race spread quickly throughout the forest, and all the animals came to watch. Mr. Weasel was elected referee.
All right, now, both you boys know the rules. You begin at the riverbank and go to the big oak tree and back, a distance of 3 miles. Now, shake hands and come out running.
Yes, sir.
Running? Speedy? You won't know whether he's coming or going.
They're at the post. They're ready. They're off and running. Well, anyway, Mr. Rabbit's off and running.
Hickety-pickety-lickety-spit, hippity-hoppity-ho. Jiminy cricket and jumpity-jump, look at how fast I can go. Hickety-pickety-lickety-spit, hippity-hoppity-ho. Jiminy cricket and jumpity-jump, look at how fast I can go.
And there goes Mr. Turtle over the starting line.
Lickety-split. Clippity-cloppity, heavens to Betsy and Bumpety-Bump. Look at how fast I can go.
Well, Mr. Turtle was off to a good start, by which time Mr. Rabbit was about halfway to the finish line. He glanced back over his shoulder to see where Mr. Turtle was, but Mr. Turtle was nowhere in sight.
Him racing me. Why, he's so slow he doesn't know whether he's coming or going. That silly old turtle's so far behind, I think I'll take me a little rest. Then by the time he reaches here, I'll be so refreshed I'll leave him behind like he was standing still.
He picked out a nice shady tree and sat down under it to rest. But it was so restful, so comfortable, so relaxing under the tree that he grew a little drowsy. And before he knew it... While way back... Sometime later, Mr. Rabbit awoke. He didn't know how long he'd slept, so he quickly looked back down the road to see whether Mr. Turtle had caught up with him. But Mr. Turtle was still nowhere in sight.
I was right. He must be going instead of coming. Oh, well, I'm not going to spend all day sitting around here waiting for him. Man, I feel good after that little nap. I think I'll really turn on the old speed now.
And he started hopping toward the finish line as fast as he could, which was pretty fast indeed. Soon, just ahead of him, up the road, he could see the finish line with all the animals waiting.
Now for the big finish. I'll really make a monkey out of that old turtle.
And going like the wind, as conceited as could be, Mr. Rabbit crossed the finish line, where he was greeted by...
Hi, Speedy. It took you so long to get here, I didn't know whether you were coming or going. Ha, ha, ha.
Mr. Rabbit could not believe his ears. He looked around, and sure enough, there was Mr. Turtle. He was startled.
You!
He was amazed.
You!
He was flabbergasted.
You! Oh! How could someone as slow as you win the race from someone as fast as me?
Very easily, Mr. Rabbit. I may be slow, but I'm sure.
And as we have just seen, it isn't always the fastest fella who gets there first. Sometimes you get there much faster if you're sure and steady and stick to the job.
Slow but sure, always wins the race. The important thing is steadiness. Forget about the pace. Slow but sure, does it every time. You are sure to reach the mountaintop with a slow but steady climb. If a drop of rain were added to a puddle every day, in time there'd be an ocean. Oceans are made that way. Slow but sure, always wins the race. The important thing is getting there. Forget about the pace. The important thing is getting there. Forget about the pace. Slow but sure. Slow but sure. never, never land. A kingdom of strange and wonderful things that appear with a wave of your hand. That appear with a wave of your hand.
One afternoon, Reynard the fox was slinking through the forest, out for a stroll in the fresh air. Suddenly, up in a tree, he saw a crow. Normally, he would have passed right by without paying any attention to the crow, because foxes don't particularly like crows. But this one was different. This one had a piece of cheese in his beak. And if there was one thing Reynard the fox loved dearly, it was cheese. As he always used to say,
Man, if there's one thing I love dearly, it's cheese. Other foxes rave about champagne and caviar, go simply wild for pheasant fricassee. Some delight in just the sight of truffles, but if I may, I beg to disagree. 'Cause I'm a cheese man myself. Any kind of cheese that's on the shelf, I'd gladly walk a mile for a hunk of mozzarella. A little whiff of Edam is like perfume to my smeller. Camembert will always hit the spot. A regular cheese man, that's what. Man, if there's one thing I really love dearly, it's CHWZ. Friends of mine can't do without an artichoke souffle. Most everything they eat is under glass. Some delight in just a bite of frog's legs, but as for me, I'll simply have to pass. 'Cause I'm a cheese man myself. Any kind of cheese that's on the shelf, my kingdom for a roll and a piece of gorgonzola. A little hint of Roquefort is like heaven to my molar. Liederkranz is just my cup of tea. A regular cheese man, that's what I am. A regular cheese man, that's me.
he stood there looking at the cheese in the crow's beak, and his mouth began to water. He began to drool. Mr. Fox really wanted that cheese.
Man, I've got to get me some of that cheese.
And so he said to the crow,
How's about giving an old friend a piece of that cheese, old friend?
But the crow dearly loved cheese, too. He couldn't answer, of course, because he had cheese in his beak, and if he opened it to speak, he'd drop it. So he just shook his head, much to Mr. Fox's disappointment.
Man, if there's one thing I hate, it's a selfish crow.
By now, his mouth was really watering. And drooling. And he thought,
maybe if I make him feel sorry for me, he'll give me a piece of his cheese. Yeah, that's it. I'll get him through the old heart. I've got those bluer than blue, lower than low. Whom can I turn to? Where can I go? Blue. I'm going out of my mind, practically mad. Nothing but heartache, nothing but bad news. Now, cows shouldn't be purple, and elephants shouldn't be white.
And foxes were never meant to be blue. Somehow it just ain't right. I'm just an object of pity, object of scorn. Never a winner. Guess I was born to lose. And so I'm begging you, please, down on my knees, let me drown my sorrows in a hunk of cheese. Mr. Crow, how can you refuse when I've got those bluer than blue, lower than low? Whom can I turn to? Where can I go? Blues.
But Mr. Crow was too smart to be fooled that easily, and he just shook his head again. Well, sir, that made Renard the Fox pretty mad.
Man, that makes me pretty mad. You ask a fellow in a nice, friendly way for a piece of his cheese, and what does he do? He turns you down. What are you gonna do with a fellow like that? Except take the whole thing away from him.
And Renard the Fox trotted back away to get a good start, and he began to run straight at the tree. Faster, and even faster. When he reached the tree, he jumped as high as he could. Certainly looked like Mr. Fox wasn't going to have any cheese that day.
But I love cheese dearly, 'cause I'm a cheese man myself. Any kind of cheese that's on the shelf. I'd like to wrap my gums round a piece of provolone, or maybe a chunk of cheddar with some mustard and bologna. A cottage full of cottage cheese would do. A regular cheese man, that's who I am. A regular cheese man, that's who.
And his mouth watered even more. And he drooled even more. And then, knowing crows like he did, he had an idea.
This little fellow's a pretty tough cookie indeed. No heart, no milk of animal kindness. There's only one way to outfox a fellow like that. I'll butter him up. I'll bend his ear. I'll tell him what he wants to hear. I'll make with the sweet talk. I'll hand him a line. Before he knows what's happening, the cheese will be mine. I'll butter him up. I'll spread it thick. It never fails to do the trick. He looks like a pigeon, he's certain to fall. My dear old mother taught me, butter him up, that's all. Mr. Crow, I've heard that you have a very nice voice.
At this, a pleased smile came over the crow's beak.
I'm getting to him. As a matter of fact, they say you have a beautiful voice.
The smile on the crow's beak grew wider with pleasure.
What a pigeon. And they say it's the most beautiful voice in the forest, in the country, in the whole wide world.
By now, the crow was grinning from ear to ear.
It won't be long now. They say when you raise your voice in glorious song,
the whole forest grows still so that they can listen to you. It's like a chorus of angels, they say, clear and sweet and heavenly. He's almost ripe. Whoever has heard your voice raised in glorious song, they say, is happy forevermore.
Mr. Crow was about ready to burst with pride at this praise.
Here it comes. Would you please do me a little favor, Mr. Crow? One little teensy-weensy, itsy-bitsy favor. Would you open your golden throat and sing me one glorious song? One heavenly note, so that I too can be happy forevermore.
The crow was so pleased by this, so happy, so flattered, that he forgot all about the cheese in his beak, and he opened his mouth to sing. And you can guess what happened to the piece of cheese.
My cheese! My cheese! I've lost my cheese!
The cheese, I've got the cheese! I've got the cheese!
I lost the cheese!
I've got the cheese!
He took my cheese!
My strategy worked!
What am I gonna do? He took my cheese!
I've got the cheese!
I beg you please!
I've got the cheese!
I'm on my knees!
My flattery
Why
worked!
did you have
I've got the cheese! Flattery is a very handy
Mr.
tool.
Fox, how could you be so cruel?
Flattery makes the smartest man a fool.
Maybe I don't.
I've got the cheese!
I've lost the cheese!
I've got the cheese!
He took my cheese!
My strategy worked!
What am I gonna do? He took my cheese! Flattery, flattery, nothing but flattery, that's what got the cheese! Oh, won't you give me back my cheese, old friend?
Old friend? Who's that?
Just a piece? A little teensy, weensy, itsy bitsy piece? But it's my cheese! I've lost my cheese!
Yes, Mr. Crow lost his cheese, but he learned this very important lesson. A flatterer usually wants something from you, and if you're foolish enough to believe him, he'll get it.
Beware, beware of the flatterer. Though what he says is music to your ears. Beware, beware of the flatterer. Whenever he appears, he tells you that you're beautiful, he tells you that you're smart. And even though it may be so, don't take his words to heart. It's best to stop and ask yourself, what does he want of me? And if it's something bad I have, what can that something be? Beware, beware of the flatterer, and compliments that tumble from his lips. With every word of the flatterer, the honey fairly drips. He tells you that you're marvelous, he tells you that you're great. It's mighty hard for anyone to resist that kind of bait. It's best to stop and ask yourself, there's something fishy here. Is there something that he's fishing for, or could he be sincere? Beware, beware of the flatterer, for when you least expect him, he'll be there. A sly old fox is the flatterer, so beware.